Hello, everyone, and welcome to the third episode of the W podcast with me, Wolvy, and SaucyJay over there, your friendly neighborhood healers. And our main topic today is going to be talking about the raid during season 1 of The War Within, how everything went, and potentially if there's anything that could have been done better. So let's start with some introductions in the sense of how has the raid been going for you? What was your role in there? And do you enjoy the season so far or not?
Yeah. Cool. Well, mine's going to be a little different because totally different scenario. But started a new guild with two of my buddies the beginning of the season, right as the raid was about to open for Mythic. Um, One of my friends, Dylan, who was raid leading for a guild. This is the guild was shooting for Hall of Fame. They've gotten close a few times, never got it, but they've been really close. He's raid leading for them, and essentially at the right before Mythic opened up, they basically removed him from the guild. And I was in that guild with him as a healer, and my other friend Adriano was in there as a melee DPS. And once they removed him, obviously we left because he's our friend. And he was just going to look for a Hall of Fame guild. I had no interest in pursuing Mythic Raid. I just wanted to hang out with them. But we thought about it, and Dylan was pretty crushed by it. He had really high hopes for taking that guild far. And Adriano and I were like, just pushed him to say, look, we'll start a guild together. We'll have you raid lead, support you with recruiting. I'll heal. Adriano will do DPS. You can, we'll help you do everything that needs any kind of tools you need for cutting edge raiding, because there's tools and stuff that is very common for that community to use. And started the week of the Mythic Raid and started with just hugging heroic and pull people in. And any of you people out there that are looking for guildies, the thing that got us the most hits was actually in the LFR, putting up an LFR saying looking for raiders in the game and starting a raid and just chatting with people in the raid. And that got us quite a few people, actually, surprisingly. We were on the recruiting Discord and the forums, and we weren't really getting much. We had all the the WoW progress and the Raider IO. We have all the stuff, and but that actually reaped the most rewards. And so so we're good. We actually got 5 of 8 last night. We killed it, which was really good. I'm really excited, and half the team wanted to take today off. The other half was like, no, let's go. So they're in there now. Actually, they finished a little while ago. Got some good progress on Princess, and pretty excited. But me personally, I'm on the sidelines. I'm like a cheerleader, mainly because long time CE raider, and I'm trying to strike a balance between quality of life and my playtime. And I just don't find sitting down 3 days a week for 3 hours and intentional raid time good for me mentally right now, especially as there's a good majority of our raiders that have never even gotten CE. And so there's a learning curve there that I don't necessarily, I know myself, I don't have the patience for that. And right now I'm really playing Guild Diplomat. Any kind of issues, I'm the old calm man. You see the gray hairs. So, I'm the wise old man that kind of keeps everything level. What I don't want to happen is me getting stressed out in progression rating, seeing same people making the same mistakes. I'm just not there. So maybe later I'll consider jumping back in. But for now, I'm just kind of on the sidelines. Occasionally help them with logs early on more. Now we have a good core of officers, and things are moving along well. How
Okay.
about yourself?
Yeah, that sounds good. Well, I am basically in a new guild as well. I will have some stories how the old guild ended, but we're basically at the same place. We managed to kill 5 out of 8 mythic. We downed Broodtwister, I think, last week, so now we are working on Kaivaz as well. And as usual, I'm having a blast in the raid because the raids are usually well designed. There's interesting bosses, and I kind of enjoy this process of working together, not with just 5 other people like it is in Mythic Plus, but you have this huge raid and you have to coordinate, etc., to down the bosses. So that has always been something that I enjoyed, and I still do, but as you said, some of these bosses actually take a lot of pulls. Our Broodtwister took like 150 pulls. We are at over 100 pulls, I think, on Kaiveza now, you know, and I know it's not getting easier later on with the last two bosses. And this is a little bit scary to me because I think the tendency is for the raids in general, the last few tiers, are to just get harder and harder, you know. And that's not necessarily a bad thing because some people like the challenge, but all the guilds that I've played in so far, with the exception of one, is just they have 2 raiding nights for 3 hours. I guess that's the normal, pretty much. So you know, you have it's not little time, but you have limited time when you have to like prog the bosses, etc. Because you're not raiding 7 days a week or 3 hours, or you know, full days, etc. So when the raids are becoming harder and harder, and there's bosses that you have to pull, like I think our Smolder on kill on season 3, 450 pulls or something. This is when I joined the guild, and the problem there was basically that people were quitting, right? So the boss was so hard that people would just get burned out, they would get tired, and they were like, this is just too much for me, right? So when I joined my current guild, I was basically in the third wave of recruits that were joining to save the guild, basically, for not falling apart after they pulled Smolderen 400 times, right? And unfortunately, I think that's kind of like a tendency that I see, because many people are getting tired of pulling the bosses so many times, and you know, they get burned out, and then they quit. Guilds fall apart, and eventually, that's for me, from at least what I'm looking, that's, I don't want to say toxic, but that's a very degenerate way for the game to progress, because obviously we talked about this before, but we're not getting new people to come and play World of Warcraft in general. What's left for mythic raiding, which is like the hardest type of content that you can play in this game. And if people are consistently quitting because the game becomes harder and harder, that's not going to lead us to a nice place. So yeah, as much as I'm enjoying the raid, problems aside this tier, I'm kind of scared how things are developing, because right now we can maintain our roster, and it looks like we're gonna be progressing just fine through this tier. But people even quit in this guild right now, right? So I'm kind of scared where this is going to lead, and this is more from the perspective in the long term of the game in general.
Yeah. Yeah, I so I have some thoughts on that. I think just as a follow up, yeah, it's been like that for a long time. It's kind of a common theme, and there's really like these 3 tiers, right? It's like race for world first, like NBA, NFL level guilds, and then it's like the B League for those guild, like that group. So that would be kind of the Hall of Fame. And then after that, it's kind of like semi-hardcore raid tier, and then there's super casual right after, or just casual after that. In that, the top is kind of like they can get whoever they want, right? They have their ways of getting people, and they go through logs, and they have their way of poaching. They're always going to do that. But the attrition that happens if you're below, now I've been in Hall of Fame guilds, and heavy roster, very intentional with like mistakes, multiple mistakes. You're benched. There's a bench, so you go on the. If you're not doing enough damage, go on the target dummy. If you're not healing enough, you need to go figure it out. But you're benched, and that's very common, and it's just part of the culture. But to your point, when you start to get to the attrition levels, now you're not going to really see that in the kind of top 300, even maybe the top 500. You're not going to see that the resolve for those guilds. They just know that there's a certain number of pulls you have to do, and there's already a certain expectation with the guildies and the raiders, I should say, that you have to come prepared, you have to be ready, and you wipe, you don't talk, you get back, you do it again. The
And
raid
let me
leaders
just
and the
add
coordinator.
something here.
Yeah, go
What
ahead.
you're saying, I totally agree. And I think part of the problem is that those guilds that you're talking about, this is what we see on Twitch, and this is the people that are streaming. This is the world first guilds, and you're thinking, yeah, they have it easy, man. They have all those people, and there's no problems. But this is not the reality. This is not your regular
No.
guild that you play in, right? So we
Oh
actually
yeah.
have different problems because we play different game.
Yeah.
But yeah, sorry for
Totally.
interrupting.
No, that's a good point.
Yeah.
But that's one of the points that I had as well, which is like, you can't really have like a totally different game, because the players that are playing the game, like when we're watching Race for World First, it's like watching NFL and NBA, and you want to aspire to be like that. You want to be the 21st person. You want to be like I'm fired up, or any of the, like the Raiders that are just like, they've been around for a while. They're like superstars in our community. And so if you're not doing the same experiences that they're doing, it's kind of, why would you do it, right? Because that's the game you play. And so um but kind of getting back to the attrition, it's a very common thing. It's going to happen I'd say at 500, you maybe not even 500, probably even lower than that. It's just this pool of, people moving from guild to guild. They kill a boss, like, we were talking last night, okay, we killed 5, who's leaving, right? Who's going to go to try to level up at another guild? Fortunately, nobody left, but it's very common. It's super common, like after a guild gets a kill that they've been progging on, for members to leave to go try to, like, oh, I'm 5 of 8 now. I'm gonna go try to get a guild that's already progging and probably getting ready to kill it, or is even one level higher. Um, Fortunately for us, we didn't have that yet, but it's super common. So you're not experiencing anything that hasn't been, and you don't have to be concerned because that's the case. I think what's important for guilds to survive is to have not everything on one person's shoulder. You need the GM or the raid leader needs to have a solid group of people supporting him, whether that's through recruitment, dealing with people, getting gold into the guild, those kind of things. That's all important. And in stuff even outside of the raid, you need to have a healthy environment, because if you're just a raid logging guild, there's no glue to keep everything together, and people aren't incentivized to stick around. So events, Mythic Plus, just things like that need to happen to keep that cohesion together, so it feels like we are a team. And when, I've been in a lot of guilds, and when you don't have that, those guilds tend to suffer.
Yeah. And going back to those problems that you mentioned, I guess right now you actually mentioned you have more than 20 people that you can maintain. And that's actually not easy to do because in my first guild that I played with, we were like getting half of the mythic bosses killed there, but we were struggling to keep 20 men on the roster.
Mm.
And it
Yeah.
was often that, because let's say we had like 21 or 22, but somebody's working today, somebody has real life issues, right? So
Mhm.
there was never 20 people online when we were raiding, and we would always have to like bug 1 or 2 people. And that was bad, because
Yeah.
it's hard. The bosses are hard enough for you to learn them and
Yeah.
not make mistakes, and now you're teaching a new person, and etc., right? Uh,
Waiting for the right one to show up. Yeah.
yeah, and that too, because you cannot just pick the first Andy that applies in LFG, right? So they at least need to look a little bit better on paper. So I guess that's one of the limitations that are currently in the game, and we don't think about it too much because it's kind of given. You have 20 men in the mythic rates, but this is a huge problem for the non-top guilds that we're talking about, because even now my guild tries to maintain a roster which is not 20 people. We have like 25 or 26, and the number constantly changes because people are quitting and we're getting new trials, etc. But
Yeah.
that is a huge problem, because if you have more than 20 people, that means that somebody's sitting out on a certain
Yep.
night, right? And
Yep.
even if you set the expectations correct and people know that they're not going to be playing on all the bosses, etc., it's still a problem because it feels bad. You show up, you're ready, and then you have to sit. It doesn't matter if it's for a good or a bad reason. Somebody is sitting there, it's waiting, and it's essentially wasting their time. And there's no way to say, oh, we have an extra person, let's do this with 21, which you could do in heroic raids, by the way, right?
Yeah.
If you're missing
Yeah.
something, you can go with 19. If you have 2 extra, you can go with 22.
Yep.
Scaling aside. So I think this is a huge problem because that kind of contributes to the raids being way too hard and people quitting because they're burned out, then you can also quit because let's say you're not the top person in your guild, or maybe especially if you're DPS, etc. Right? You can easily have extra DPS. So now you're set out for whatever reason. That's basically another incentive for you to quit the game because you're not playing, right? And apparently it's not easy to get into good guilds, so you wasted the time to get recruited, to prove yourself in front of the guild, and now you're watching from the sidelines, and that just feels bad. So do you think that the 20-man raid should stay as mythic, or maybe that's something that needs to change?
No, I think it's good. Here's why. I mean, you look at basketball. I reference sports because it's just easy for people to relate to, and it's not directly tied to the game. You're gonna have, roster of 11 or 19 in basketball, whatever it is. In football, you're gonna have like 50, and it's all. I'll even take a step back. It's all perspective, and it's really goal driven. Like, what is the guild's goal? And our goal was to build a community first and start to raid. But we know we're all CE, so we want to get there. And we know I've like I said, Hall of Fame or Hall of Fame level even before there was a Hall of Fame, doing that kind of stuff. That's in the view. So with that in mind, there's two things. When we're recruiting, and we're always recruiting, even if we have 30, we're always recruiting, and we're getting ready to start a second team that raids the same days and the same hours. That is kind of like a farmer team. The expectation is set from the beginning, and sometimes that doesn't really click when people come on the team, because we notice the first time we bench them, and it's like, why did I get benched? Oh, well, we had a problem. There was actually somebody else that wasn't able to do what they needed to do, so we needed to change the comp, and that means you had to sit too because I had to bring this other person. Or it's like, no, you weren't performing. No, yes, I was. Well, we have the logs. Here's why. And sometimes you get that, and you have people that accept ownership, and you have those that are just in denial, or those that just don't want to sit. And unfortunately for us, that doesn't work. And they're we say, hey, you're welcome to stay, but you're no longer, your trial's been failed. The other thing that we do is we maintain a very dynamic spreadsheet that shows who's playing which bosses, and people know before the raid week which bosses they're on, which ones they're sitting on. So it's not like the night before or the day of or 5 minutes before the raid, people are wondering, am I in or am I not? No, we announced it before. The roster's already built out, and I think it's really on Prague. It's kind of like comp and performance, more performance than comp. But on farm, it's like, who needs what gear first, right? And is the makeup work? And we make sure we have a healthy rotation so that people aren't just on the sidelines the whole time, just waiting to go in. We do a pretty hefty rotation with the guild, and you could see it all in the spreadsheet. And we're completely transparent. Everybody has access to it. They know when they're going to be in. They know when they're going to sit. So there's not like feelings involved. And everybody understands, and they get the concept that, look, as time goes on, if you're dedicated to the guild and you stick around, not everybody's going to be like you, and we're going to have attrition, and we need to have a healthy roster so we're not pugging, missing raid nights because only 16 people were signing in, and we're not going to pug 4 people on prog night. There's no way. And even on some of the reclears farm, even 4 people can mess up mechanics if they don't know what they're doing. So, we intentionally keep around 30. And at this point, everybody's good. And because we do a healthy rotation. So I like 20-man roster. I think it's set. And I like that heroic is, allows you to have some flex in it. And that's cool for less hardcore. But when you have like a competitive based model, and let's be honest, this is really designed for those people, even though the majority of the money is coming in for the players like you and I that are, way lower than the rank for the race for world first. We're the ones paying Blizzard's bill, but we're all playing because we like what those guys are doing and we want to be like them. And so Blizzard can't make a raid where, Echo, whoever comes in and just one shots all the bosses. It would, if they cleared all in 3 days or a week in one lockout, that's not going to work for Blizzard, right? And so that, and kind of transitioning to another topic, but But that's kind of my thought. I think it needs to be treated professional. I think 20 is good. 10, I think, felt a little bit too vulnerable when you had deaths, right? If one person dies, that's huge. 20, man, you could sustain with one death. Even if it's late in the you could still pull off a kill. So I like 20. I don't think they need to change it. I actually I'm a huge fan of it.
Okay.
I'll kind of pause and throw it back to you there.
Here's my take on this. We actually, like what you said, we actually set people for. We did like a old run for heroic, right? So it was going fine, but once we get to the last boss, we started wiping. So we look into the logs. We had more than 20. We had like 28 or 30 people with some friends, etc. Right? And we look into the logs. We set the people who are underperforming. We switch to some mains, etc. We kill the boss, right? So I think from that perspective, it's fine if there's a certain threshold and you're far from the threshold. Getting sit, it's totally understandable. Like you can take it as you want, but there's enough resources there that can help you improve. But my problem with the 20 is that all right, now we're not running ults. That's our main rate. We're trying to kill the boss. We're progging. And you have more than 20 people who are performing above the threshold, right? So they're good players. But the problem is there's only 20 slots, right? And you end up sitting people that you don't necessarily want to sit, and that's bad for the guild. From the guild's perspective, that's bad for the person who is getting sit. So this is where the problem with the 20 comes for me. Because it doesn't benefit anyone in that regard, right? So it is a problem if you have 23, 24 good players. The 20 is quite limiting. And it is also limiting in the sense of the old guild that I had, where we had not 24 and 25 people on the roster. So we had to bug one or two, which was also bad, right? So in my eyes, there's very little situations where that set number of 20 is perfect for a guild. Usually it's not, right? And I understand why it's there, but we also know that they can do scalable rates because this is what happens in Heroic, etc. And maybe have some limits in that regard, because there are people in Heroic which run 2-6 comp, 2 tanks, 2 healers, 6 DPS, right? Maybe that's too little if they don't want to do that, because they have scaling issues with that as well. Like there was this one boss which would spawn odds in Sepulchre, I think, and it was very hard if you do it with less people on Heroic, right? Because the odds are still there and it's the same number. But maybe if they at least give us some way to change from 20 to, let's say, 22 or 18. And I know there's going to be problems with, tuning everything and then making the fights work with different number of people. But I think this is going to give the guilds a little bit of freedom, and it's going to make people a little bit better, because you won't, if you have 22 or 23 people, you won't have to sit 2 people, even if they're good players. So
I have to respectfully, I have a different, I don't want to say disagree, but at that tier, I look at it like sports, like professional sports, and you have to have 5 people on the court, even though you got really good point guards. You have to have 11 on the field of football, because one quarterback and a center and a couple wide receivers. Maybe you want 2 running backs, maybe you want 1, and you have that flexibility. But you have to have 11 people on the field, and so guilds have to recognize that that's the bar. And that we know that's changed over time. There was a time where you could do 10 or 20 man raids at the high level, right? It was progression. You could do both, and they were separate raids, or you can do one or the other, and they were completely treated separate, but still considered top tier raids. I think they settled on the 20 because that's just a balanced number. And if you don't want to make that a hard code thing, then do heroic. And I think that's kind of where they landed. I think, when you start to talk about flex raid in a competitive environment, there's always opportunity for people to exploit or find weird nuances with, okay, if we do like 19 on this boss, and then 14 on this one. We get the like, it just gets crazy, right? And that's too
They
much to
kind of do
manage.
the same thing right now, though. If they can exploit something, they're gonna do it, right?
Yeah, they always find it. Yeah,
Yeah.
they always find it. I mean, no, even if it's outside the raid, they it's every single time there's some guild that gets caught, and they know they're gonna get in trouble, but
Yeah.
they still try any competitive advantage, right? So I'm totally fine with it. I think I think it's on the guilds to wrestle with what they need to do to make that work, and if that means you know, you only maintain 22 people. For us, we know the people that are sitting on the prog bosses know they're going to get it on the next one
Yeah.
and know they're probably going to be on, they're in on the next prog boss first, right? Like we pay attention to that stuff. It's not like we have, this is the progression group and then everybody else is kind of like farm or second kill. It's like, no, we rotate and we make sure that everybody feels like they're contributing for first kills. And the good thing is like we're brand new, but we're moving up the ranks. Like every single time we get a kill, we're higher than we were on the server, which is kind of how we're measuring it. So, and we're on pretty competitive server. It's Area 52 in the US, which is pretty competitive. So it's not
Isn't
like
that the biggest server? I think.
it's one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so I guess this is where we differ a little bit because
Yeah.
I am very competitive, right, in general, but which is why I don't enjoy just going and doing heroic because it eventually becomes way too easy and it's kind of dumb to just go and keep farming it, and
Yeah.
even the gear is not what you want from there. So this is why I want to mythic raid. But although I'm competitive and the people in my guild are competitive, I don't see us as being the NBA team, right? Because this is, for me,
Mhm.
this is what we see on Twitch. This is the race to world first, and the guilds that are, let's say, a Hall of Fame, because we're not there. And I consider us to be a lower tier guild, right? And I'm fine to have a guild, if it's in the NBA guild, let's say this is the Hall of Fame guilds. I'm fine if the restrictions for them are a little bit stricter and harder to achieve. But for us, it's more of a limitation, right? I consider us to be regular players and trying to put us in the same level as the people who are Hall of Fame.
Mhm.
I don't want to say it's unfair, but it just makes it way too harder for regular players. I don't want to say casual players, but for us to maintain that level. So maybe this is where the difference comes from, because I think what you're saying is you strive to be one of the NBA guilds, even if you're not there yet, right? You try to be the Hall of Fame guild, and although we wouldn't mind to be there, we want to be there. At least in my mind, we're a little bit in a lower level, so all of those restrictions are just a little bit maybe too punishing for us. But okay, I think those
No,
those two
we
points
agree
make
on that.
sense. Yeah,
No, I agree with you on that for sure. And I
yeah,
think that's where when you start to look at, and I think we're going to actually touch on this a bit later.
yeah,
But I think there's some stuff that they can do after Race for World First for the Hall of Fame guilds, or maybe even after that, and start to kind of ease it up for the non Hall of Fame guilds. Essentially, I think after that it should be, we talked about bottlenecks with gear and things like that. So I think not only from a gearing standpoint, but also the buff, the shifting sands or whatever it's called.
yep,
Um, Things like that, I think, are very beneficial for those opportunities. And it maybe even scaling after, right? Yeah, maybe there's something to be said like after Hall of Fame closes, yeah, you can scale up and scale down in Mythic because then it's not really as competitive. Even though there is still like this competitive. It's like even with my guild, my raid leader is competitive with two other guilds, like, and they are like competing with each other, right, on who's going to do better. And we're not even top 100 US or something like that. So, there's always going to be competitive edge no matter what. But I think there is something there about um, after maybe Hall of Fame transitioning some other things to make it a little easier for the rest of us.
yeah, and they do that all the time. They're nerfing bosses.
Yeah. Yep.
Previously, they're still actually doing that, and the severe sense buff is probably one of the biggest pluses this tier because Right now, it's up to like 9% or something. So
9.
you're
Yeah,
9% more
9%.
powerful. It's only going to get higher. So for guilds like the guild that I play in, that's actually awesome, right? That's a huge boost. Getting the new tier of that buff, whatever you call it, the new
Yeah.
turn-in of the
Yep.
quest, that's actually better than getting a better piece of gear. Like
It's
the
yeah,
boost
exactly.
is
It's
bigger,
huge.
and
Yeah.
it is
Yeah.
for the whole raid. It's not just you getting
Yeah.
one piece of gear. So that's actually huge, and I welcome it. And I kind of welcome the nerfs as well, because if you're stuck in a boss and you're getting those 10% wipes and you're missing a bunch of damage or a bunch of healing, whatever it is, the nerfs are welcome. But at the same time, I keep thinking, okay, so we all know this. The Race to World First is, and then the guilds that are playing there, they're playing absolutely different version of the bosses
Sure.
for
Yep.
the one that
100%.
we're going to be playing when we get there.
Yeah.
And these people, the people that play the original version of the boss, the one that we see on the Race to World First, it's like 5 guilds, man. It's not even 10 probably, right? Because sometimes the nerfs come as soon as both Liquid and Echo kill it. So there's only 2 guilds that pull the boss in that version because it's too hard. And
Yeah.
by the time then the non-Hall of Fame guild, like 2 months later, gets there, or whatever the time is, right? It's a completely different boss, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And I think that's fine. Like, this is needed. But at the same time, Blizzard is designing bosses for 2 guilds. So that's like 50 people, right? They play that. Then they design a different type of tuning and boss for like the next 100 guilds, and then for the next and the next, etc. So I keep thinking, obviously, you cannot do something crazy as, let's say, move those people into like a private server so they can have their raids there, because they're the only ones who are gonna see it anyway, right? So why
Yep.
not give them the best gear, put them on that server? They're not going to do splits, which is something that I guess, I don't know if they like it. They probably don't, but once I'm watching the Race to World First, I don't want to watch splits, man. I want to see boss pools. I want to see them struggling to kill the bosses, right? And then they have like a
Yep.
whole week of splits, and everybody is just not watching or whatsoever. So that could be a solution, but then the people on the regular servers would still make a separate race, etc. Right? So. But here's another take. I don't play Final Fantasy, but I know they have this difficulty level there, which is like above everything else, which is like extremely, extremely hard. So
Okay.
in my eyes, it's basically the same. They have the same tiers as well. They have like the normal, the heroic, the mythic, and then I don't know if it's called ultimate or something, but then they have this tier, right, which is the extremely hard stuff. So, what would it be beneficial if Blizzard actually does this tier, which is the original version of the bosses, the one that the road to the Race to World First guilds
Mhm.
kill, right, and leave it there, right? And it's not going to have any type of rewards whatsoever, maybe an achievement or something, or it's not actually going to be an achievement, a feat of strength,
Mhm.
because I don't think it's fair to have an achievement that nobody can achieve except
Yeah,
like
for
50
sure.
people, right? But
Yeah.
so leave it there so that if somebody potentially ever wants to go and see, hey, let me see how Echo or Liquid experience that
Mhm.
fight, go ahead, man, do it.
Yeah.
It's there.
Sure.
But for the regular guilds, we're gonna be still doing mythic. We're gonna get the gear from there. It's gonna be the same, but the bosses are gonna be tuned to the level at which we can kill them initially, right? So they're
Mhm.
gonna be designed for us to be able to kill them, not for Echo to be able to kill them, right? And
Yeah.
then that initial tuning and that initial fight that essentially goes out of the game in like the first week and nobody ever sees
Mhm.
again, it is still going to be there,
Yeah.
it is
Yeah.
going to be available. And the Race to World First in that sense is still going to be there, and it's still going to be exciting because those guilds, this is what they want to do, right?
Yeah.
So maybe that's a potential solution that is going to make it better for us, but it's not going to completely diminish the Race to World First, because, as you said, if they go and one shot the boss, nobody's going to be interested to watch this, and
Yeah.
nobody's going to care.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, that's a good point. I was thinking though, there's another tier, right? We talked about Race to World First and the top 2, 3, maybe even 4, you could say,
Yeah.
guilds. And then you got the Hall of Fame, but there is another tier, right? Technically, there's cutting edge, right? That's the
Yeah.
cutting edge raiders, and that's a thing, right? There's a timeline on that, and once that switch gets flipped, you can't get that achievement anymore. And so there is that tier, which is still considered, I don't know if that's considered hardcore, semi-hardcore, or what, but you do have to achieve killing all the mythic bosses before that specific date, or I think it's the next tier is released, or I don't know
Yep.
when it is exactly, but um, so I think that that is still a different game between those tiers, right? Those are three completely different games,
Absolutely.
honestly. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and then after cutting edge is like AOTC, you would kind of say more
Yeah.
casual
Yeah.
gameplay. Even if you're like 4 or 5 of Mythic or whatever, like you're if you don't get cutting edge, you're not part of that group of cutting edge, right? So um and they are nerfing or making adjustments even for that group of cutting edge raiders, and giving us the buffs and things. I like the idea that you said of like having like this completely separate thing that's just like for those 4 guilds, or maybe it's
Maybe it's 10
there's
eventually,
a
but
few.
yeah.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, I think it is around 10. I mean, and I don't know if you've been keeping up with what's going on with the Asian community, but they've been, I mean, they're
Yeah.
not getting first and second, but they are dominating across the board in the top 10. I think they're
Oh,
over
they
half
had
of.
a huge prize announced at least I think for the last race to World First. Like
Yeah,
I
they've
don't know
been
what the amount was, but I think that's why they
a
pushed so
million. I
hard.
think it was like
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
million or something crazy like that.
It was 1 million. I'm not sure what the currency was. But it could have been $1 million too, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
and that
I mean,
was
they
only
want
if
them
they
to
win it.
compete, but they're creeping up. I
Oh
mean,
yeah, yeah, for
I mean,
sure.
if you go back and look at the last few rate tiers, they're half of the top 10. Like
Yeah.
they're there, right?
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
shown. They're not getting first and second, but they're right. I mean, if some of those groups start to really kind of come together, there's opportunities. But anyways, I think those top 10, great. Make a separate tier for them. If you said like if you want to queue up into that thing, go for it. You get all the gear you want. You don't have to grind. You don't have to do splits. You don't have to do all this stuff. Um, I think that there is, I think back when I always reference sports, uh, spring training. I lived in Arizona, and teams like Oakland Athletics and these teams would come to Arizona to do spring training. And I kind of look at splits like that. I look at that as like the ramp up to the regular season or to the Super Bowl. Um, so maybe splits is kind of like the regular season, and then when they get into Mythic, it's like the Super Bowl, and competing towards it. And I think people, it's not like they want to watch the splits, but there's all these really cool conversations and strategies being talked about, and they're watching who's playing what specs, and so I think there's still a lot there. So I kind of like that essence of that gameplay, because I hear people all the time, oh, so and so's playing fire, or he's playing BM, or they're tanking with Brewmaster versus Blood DK, right? And
Yeah.
why? And they're, oh, but now they're bringing in this, right? And so all that theory crafting and those conversations are fun, right? They're exciting, and it's a really exciting time. I like that. I don't want that to go away. But I do see a big advantage of like saying, look, this group is totally separate, and it's a huge difference. I mean, these guys are killing it in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
For us, it's taking 6, 8 months sometimes, right? That's a huge difference in pools and hours spent, and just skill, right? And that's okay. I mean, um, I think there's something there. How Blizzard's going to handle that, I just don't know. I think it's an interesting concept, and I don't think that that's something that's impossible. But what does it mean for culture? What does it mean for the community? What does it mean for the kind of the weekend warriors and the people that strive to be them? It still motivates people, right? They're still going to have to get better and learn their class and do these things, and there could be a whole separate group of people that just go for that. So it's an interesting concept, and I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah, and there's a huge difference because let's say it takes. I think I was listening to Dorkin. He said it took us 70 hours to clear the whole raid. in Mythic, right? For the Paragon, all the bosses, etc. And I'm thinking, yeah, but that's you because you play in such a guild, you know. That's not regular guilds that do splits and stuff, you know.
No way.
You have your preseason preparation, etc., as you said. But for regular players, it's just, man, just give me the bow. I want to play, you know.
Yeah,
I don't want to
that's right.
practice as
Still
bad
being,
as that sounds, right? I
yeah,
just want to play
yeah.
and I'll learn as I'm playing, right?
Yep.
So I was thinking if it takes them 70 hours to clear the raid, they do this in a week or so, right? Or maybe 2 weeks, because
Weeks.
they
Yeah.
don't raid for 3 hours a week. But
Yeah.
then at the same time, for my guild, if it takes them 70 hours, it's not gonna be 70 for us, man. It's going to be more, right? I'm gonna come up with a number, but let's say it's not double, but let's say it's 100 or 120
Oh yeah.
hours. But for us, those 120 hours, they're not going to be 2 or 3 weeks because we rate 6 hours a week,
Yeah.
right? So if
That's
it's
right.
120 hours, that's
Yeah.
20 weeks, man. And
Yeah.
yeah. And then,
Well.
as we said, we have different problems. Somebody doesn't show up a certain night, we
Yeah.
cannot rate because we don't have a tank. So
Yeah.
it's a whole
Well, it's
different
also
story.
compounded. It's compounded too because 70 hours, you got to think about this. They're locked in, right? They're completely locked
Yeah.
in. That it's only WoW. They have people cooking for them.
Yeah.
They have bedrooms right next to them. They have analysts making weak auras and helping with strategy and maxes. It's just not just max, right? There's
Yeah.
teams behind them,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it is completely locked in WoW for that period. Is that is it. And here's you and me. We have daughters and sons and wives and work, and there's
Yeah.
all this stuff around us, and then we come in and we have our 3 to 4 hours that we got to do it. Yeah, it's so even 70 hours you have to conflate, you have to like compound that to like, I mean, that's just so much manpower going into that one person 70 hours because there's all this ancillary support that they're
Oh,
getting.
the 70 hours for Dorky, that's like a regular guild. That's not the world first guild.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
okay,
he's not
okay.
playing there. But I don't actually. That's a good stat that we can try to pull up. I don't know how much time it takes them, but for the race to world first. But yeah, it's probably actually more for them because it's the harder version of the
They're
bosses,
doing
right?
12 hours a
Yeah,
day.
they're doing
Yeah.
12 hours a day, 10 days. It's probably over 100 hours too. But so yeah, the 70 hours is basically the regular, whatever that means, C guild that's right after the race to world first. But yeah, as I said, it's a completely different game.
Yeah, for sure.
And I guess let's switch a little bit to like the chart we have right now on the screen. Basically shows that the last 4 bosses that we see on this tier are taking all over 100 pulls, and that's the race to world first. But that kind of relates back to how hard those bosses are and how many pulls it takes for the regular guilds to kill them. And that difficulty, I guess, is, as I said, it's a tendency. The raids only get harder. And I was thinking that, especially if you have those extra, like you can leave that difficulty for a different tier, but then maybe some of those bosses need to be killable a little bit faster for the regular guilds so that they can achieve their goals. There's less people quitting because they're burned out, etc. I'm not saying make it way too easy, right? But then some of the other problems, and I'm pretty sure you experienced that too. Let's focus on some of the specific fights for this tier. We just killed Broodtwister, right? We spent 2 nights in the beginning when we were just starting to prog trying to set up weak auras. And
Yep.
for those of you who don't know how the fight works on Mythic, so there's these eggs that you need to break, and there's 4 eggs, and 8 people get marked. So you have to have exactly 2 people on each of the 4 eggs. And that is not something that you can just go and do without a weak aura, right? It is impossible. Like, I'm betting as much money as you want that there's nobody who can do this fight on Mythic without a weak aura. But also at the same time, the weak auras are not something, it's not your friendly neighborhood weak aura, right? It's a very complicated weak aura that needs to do a whole bunch of assignments, etc. Then there's also the worms that you need to interrupt, and there's a certain order, and that's another weak aura, etc. So we ended up, I think there's like a package from Liquid that I think you actually have to buy, right? So we ended up getting this. everybody needs to set it up in a specific way, because it might be you who gets marked by a private aura, then you need to mark something, so everybody in the raid needs to have an assist so the weak aura works, and everybody needs to have the latest version. And after you do all of that, it turns out that your bigwigs or your DBM is also marking something, and it's overriding the weak aura. And it's a nightmare, man. It's a nightmare. So we spent 2 nights just trying to get the weak auras working the same way for everyone, right?
Yep.
And then on the next day, somebody could not come, so we need to pull one person who was not there in the previous night, and now we have to set it for them, because if it's not working for one person, then everybody gets screwed because the marks are wrong, right? So that was such a huge nightmare. And then we had one person say, man, why is this fight designed like this? Like, why do we have to do this? What if, because you have 4 eggs and 8 people, right? What if when the egg pops, it gets a certain color, let's say orange, and then there's 2 people who get orange circle around them, and there's 2 people with blue circle. You wouldn't need a weak aura for that, You can just go and play.
Go to blue.
Yeah. So I don't know how that experience was for you, but for me, that was one of the worst experiences I ever had in raiding in general. Like, it took like half of the prog of this boss was not progging the boss. We were progging the weak auras and the add-ons, etc. Right.
Yeah, we had one full night of that, and a lot of angry. Our raid leader Dylan, very angry with people not keeping the weak auras up to date, not following the instructions, and and he posts everything in a very organized manner, and people still don't do it, and so now you gotta kind of handhold and walk everybody through it, and still find issues. So yeah, we went through the same thing. It was one full night of that, and then a couple little weeks after, and then it was kind of cruising after that. But to your point, I think that's a little bit it's a little bit too much. Maybe again for that that top tier, that's fine because they'll figure it out. But coming back down to earth, I think that's you want to play the game, right? We got other stuff going on in our real lives. We just want to log in and kill dragons. And when you have to spend time tweaking your settings, that's not what we want to do, and that's unfortunate. And so that does need to change. That design is severely flawed.
And we were literally like standing there for an hour and a half, not pulling the boss. You're just staring at the screen and waiting for somebody to click a button somewhere. It was that bad. And even the worst part is like, because I was initially healing on this fight, so I had everything set up, etc. And then at some point they were like, yeah, let's try one healer less, and we'll have Wolvy switch to DPS. And I'm like, hey, okay, I'll DPS. I switched to DPS, everything is set up, right? I switched to DPS, and all of a sudden the marks stopped working. Like it messed it up, and I figure out it's me, and I'm like, wait, what? I don't know why it happened, but I had the bigwigs and the DBM stuff turned off, so it doesn't override the weak auras. When I switched my spec to DPS, it reset the DBM. Or I don't know if it's because I logged off or something. I'm not sure, but then I had to go and do everything again. But we have to figure out it's me, because I was sure everything is correct on my end. And that was, as I said, that was one of the worst experiences I've ever had. Not to mention that when all the small ads spawn, there was like so much lag that I would freeze out, and I was hoping that everything is going to catch up eventually so I can continue playing, which just added to this negative experience. And then we go to Kaiveza. You're programming this right as well right now, and I actually love this fight. Technically, you don't need any weak auras to play it, right? So the mechanics are relatively simple once you know how to solve them. You can just put some marks on the room. You know where you need to go. That's it. There's like, I don't know, 4 or 5 mechanics maybe in total, but that doesn't mean that the fight is easy. Actually, it's very complicated to handle the overlaps, etc. Right? But I'm having a blast. It's one boss. I'm not lagging because there's no ads, There's no weak auras. There's things that can notify you, right? But there's no required weak auras, so to speak. And it's just, you have to go in there, you have to execute, you have to play correctly, and that's it. Right?
Yeah. That's going to be, watching them tonight and, having fun and not having to deal with the weak ores. You know, even going back to Broodtwister, I mean, there was a period of time where there was so much lag that they were running scripts to make sure that they didn't have weak ores that had like these special things
The
that were, you know,
models, yeah.
causing it. Yeah, exactly right. So all of that, it's crazy. So yeah, it's a nice refreshing to get through that. I mean, still got to go back and prog because I think we're not locking out. We're gonna keep re-clearing. Just I mean, we have the gear. Everybody's geared up because everybody does Mythic Plus, but um, you know, Dylan wants to continue to reclear, so I think we're going to be reclearing. So they
Oh,
get go,
we
but at least
extended,
they
man.
can skip that boss, right? Like they don't have to go right back
Yeah,
to
yeah.
that one. They can.
Technically, you can do that, but essentially, the sentiment in our guild was we're extending because we don't want to see eggs at all ever
Yeah,
again.
yeah,
That's kind of, I don't know if I should say this, but on Kaiveza, there's like this balls that go around. You have to dodge from one of the mechanics, and then you
yeah.
get sucked into the middle of
Yep.
the room for the other mechanic. And everybody was saying, you know, I don't want to do any eggs anymore. I prefer to be sucking balls. You know, that's what we were
That's WoW
agreeing on.
community right
Yeah.
there. Yeah, yeah, for sure. That's the
So
kind
yeah,
of thing.
that tells you a lot. And I'll just go back to say this again. They were very simple things that they could have done in the Broodtwister fight. So
I agree.
you don't have to use Recourse as well. But let's hope. I hope that they're gonna learn from this in the future because all right, even the guilds to world first, they have this recourse being made for them, etc. But I'm pretty sure they didn't enjoy that fight either. Maybe if you're like the warrior that spins around and kills all the ads and it's top of the meters,
Big
maybe for
numbers.
some people,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah,
Big numbers.
yeah, you can enjoy that as well without recourse for sure. So
Yep. Yep.
that's something to talk about. And yeah, let's just mention there were a lot of bugs in general in the raid. There was a huge shout from the community because not only on these bosses, like the lines on the queen fight, there were also like the court boss was getting like the Broodtwister would hit you for like 40 seconds for some of the bugs without doing mechanics, right? So some guilds got a free kill. Then you could like pull the court boss to not do any mechanics and kill it this way. And there were also like as we know, I'm a little bit of a special case because I play from Europe on a different server that's far away from me, but a lot of people were actually disconnecting, you know,
Yeah.
just be,
Well,
and
yeah.
it's like, and it's not like somebody's internet because all of a sudden three people disconnect, right?
Yeah.
It's not
Exactly.
like, oh,
Yep.
my internet lags. It is
Yep.
something related to the servers. So that also contributed to a very bad experience in some of the fights. And um, maybe they're changing something. I think they said this. They're changing the way that their servers are working. They're trying to improve them. They're trying to make them better. But many things make it to life. You know, they're debugging a lot
Yeah.
of bugs in life, and I don't approve of that. I think they need to do a
Yeah.
better on this end.
Yeah, you know, that's going to be a challenge, I think, with, you know, the acquisitions that's happened and now them being under Microsoft. And I mean, you can even see with like the pacing of the content now, and it's going to be quicker, I think. And I think some of that's a money play. And those decisions are being made by people that probably don't play the game and don't understand. So I'll be honest, I'm a little cynical when it comes to where that's going to go. I think we're going to continue to see that and have to deal with it. And I think they're, you know, I will say that they're very regular on trying to fix some stuff, and then some stuff they're not. So, you know, who knows how that's going to go. But I don't see that changing anytime soon.
Yeah.
I mean, it's even in PvP, you know, there's like people that, you know, have a way to like glitch and like you can't hit them. Like it just and they exploit it, and I report them. I mean, I encourage you, like when things are happening, report it, because eventually they'll, you know, if enough people are
Yeah.
doing it to the bad players, it'll catch up. But yeah, I don't think that you know, uh it's an older engine, you know, it's been around for a long time, and I think, you know, I mean, geez, even I'm sure you experienced this in some of the keys. Like you could fall through some of the walls in
Yeah.
an arena. You could just go through the walls for like a couple days. It was like, how does that happen? Like, what's going
Yeah.
on? Like, It's just so weird. So I don't think that's gonna change anytime soon. I'll be
Yeah,
honest.
and even like last week they fixed it, but last week when you do M plus and you go into the City of Threats, the timer would start and you can just walk out of the dome even before the timer
You
it's
just
running.
start
Yeah,
pulling trash.
and
Yeah, have fun.
and since we're talking about bugs, I'll mention one more thing. When these things happen, sometimes they're hot fixes, but often we get those scheduled maintenances that are not on Tuesday for NA, and I
Yeah.
think it's Wednesday for the EU. And I'm curious if the EU gets the extra maintenances, but especially at the start of a tier, we get a scheduled maintenance on Wednesday, then we get one on Thursday, and then you get one more on Friday. Yeah.
Yep.
And that's actually, I guess I'm a snowflake here again, but that's a huge problem for me because, as I said, I'm in Europe. I play on NA servers. So when they do those scheduled maintenances, which are early morning in the NA, that's exactly the time frame when I can play the game, right? So that's like the middle of the day for me when I can devote a few hours to play the game. So that was a huge problem, and my oldest guild was actually a morning raiding guild on in the NA, right? And it happened so that we didn't raid on Tuesdays because the maintenance was basically in the middle of our raid time. So it is just like it's impossible. But then, if they scheduled an extra maintenance on Wednesday, that would be in the middle of our raid time as well, right? And when they started doing this, we just didn't raid because we would either have to like raid for 30 to 40 minutes and then make a break for an hour and then have 30, 40 minutes left or something if it finishes in
Yep.
1 hour, right? So
Yeah.
that's not plausible, right?
Big if.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the story of how this guild fell apart, as I said, we were struggling to get 20 people at the first place, and then this maintenance started to happen, and that was so we raided in Shadowlands a lot, and then Dragonflight started, and we were like, okay, we're gonna continue, we're gonna raid in season 1 of Dragonflight. And then we log in on Wednesday. There's scheduled maintenance. Okay, we log off. Then we see there's another one on Thursday, right? And we agreed for that specific week because we raided on Wednesday and Thursday. That was our two days that we would raid. We agreed, okay, let's raid on Friday this week, because we skipped 2 days because of the maintenances. Let's at least go and see the raid and try to do something there. We log on Friday. There's another scheduled maintenance. And our raid leader just said, guys, it's hard enough to fight the attendance boss, to fight with killing all those bosses. Now I have to fight the maintenance boss as well,
Mhm.
I'm done. And he decided to take a break. He still hasn't come back to the game, he quit. And after he quit, basically, it's not that Blizzard just lost one person because everybody else in this guild, it basically fell apart without him. They started quitting as well, right? And that comes back to, the story, I guess, connects to all those bugs and all those problems that are released in the game, and then they're fixed later with scheduled maintenances.
Yep.
So, and just to add one more thing, you said Microsoft. My brother actually works in Microsoft, and he's far from the gaming stuff, but he's working on their distributed systems. And he was visiting me last summer, and we were talking something. He knows that I play, and I mentioned that there's still scheduled maintenances on Tuesday, and he started laughing and he said, "Wait, what? They still take down their servers to do maintenance, man? This thing needs to be live. It's freaking 2023 because it
Yeah.
was last
Yeah.
year, right?" And
Yeah.
this is what he does for Microsoft, right? He's working on their
Yeah.
servers
Distributed
and
system.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
So he just started laughing, and I was thinking, man, he is actually right. Like, imagine,
Yeah.
and let me say this: we are in a paid service. Like World of Warcraft is
Yeah.
a paid
Yeah.
service. You're paying every
Yeah.
month to use their
Yep.
service.
Yep.
Imagine what would be if Google was doing the maintenance and said, like, you cannot use our search engine the next 2
Sorry.
hours. And
Yeah.
their
Yeah.
stuff
Can't
is
use Gmail.
yeah,
No Gmail.
their stuff is free, by the way, just saying. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
so what it would be if they are like, yeah, on Tuesday that morning, no email, no searching,
Yeah.
we'll be right
Go
back.
crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and then you extend your
It's just
maintenance
accepted.
to
Yeah. It's
to
just
8 hours.
accepted, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
so
unfortunate.
that's a huge pain that I have. I don't know if I'm a snowflake in this, but they definitely need to improve on that, and I'm pretty sure in that.
It's never fun. I can't stand, especially when it's back to back to back, and then
Yeah.
it's like 7 to 8, and then you get ready, and it's like
One
seven to
more.
nine, and you're like,
Yeah.
yeah, oh, 7 to noon. Okay, not till 3 now. Okay, and then the first day it was just like ridiculous. It was so bad.
I
It's
think there
like,
was one patch that got released, and it was like an 8-hour maintenance.
yeah,
You
it was
know.
that was just in
So
this recent The War Within. They had a huge one. It was like supposed to be 8 to 3, and it didn't even come up to like 9 p.m. for me, which
yeah.
isn't that's all
Yeah.
day. It's like what? Oh, here we go. We're gonna give you three days of game time.
No, no, no. They didn't give 3 days. So let me talk about this. Eventually, after all those, I think it was one day that they added.
Oh, is it one
It
day?
was one day, yeah. And first, I don't care about this one day because this is the time of the day that I get to play. I don't play the whole day. I don't play 24
Yeah,
hours. I have
yeah,
this
yeah.
3 or 4 hours, and now that's maintenance, so I couldn't play 3 days in a row. You're just giving me one day, which I don't even know if I'll be able to play at all this day, right? And then I'll say something else. I don't know how correct I'm on this, but I have this small mobile game that I'm playing on my phone, right? It's a small game. It has no incentive to be something as big as WoW is, and
Yeah.
they don't have those maintenances there. But every
No.
time they mess up something, their server goes down, etc., they send you their currency that they're trying to sell you,
Yeah.
right? Their
Yeah,
gems,
yeah.
right?
Yep. I
Every
played some
time
games like
they're
that. Yeah.
sending you some of this currency, even if it was even something minor, right?
Yeah.
So basically, in my eyes, they're saying, okay, sorry, we screwed up. Now we're gonna
Here
give
you go.
you that resource that we're trying to make money out of, so
Yep.
you can
Yep.
basically they're hurting themselves as a punishment, kind of,
Yep.
because they screwed up and now they're trying to
Yeah.
fix it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like maybe that's too harsh, but every time this happens, every time they have a scheduled maintenance, they should like give us a day for that, even if it
Yeah.
was just like 1 hour. So they're punished, and they show that they realize they messed up, and
Yeah.
it's a paid service, right? And
Yeah.
I,
We're
I
paying for it.
yeah, and I guess
Yeah.
one day for them is a huge thing, because if there's like millions playing, and one day is like what, I don't know how many cents it's supposed to be, like if you divide the $15 per month, whatever. So that's
Yeah.
probably a huge amount of money that they're losing for one day. But I think that should be the status quo, so they stop doing the maintenances. Maybe that's too
Yeah.
harsh of a point, but that's what I think. I'm sorry.
No, I mean we pay for it. If it was
Yeah,
free, that'd be different, right? But we're paying for it, and and some of them paying forever, right? So it's
yeah.
like, we shouldn't have to. You're right. At this point in time, not necessary. We shouldn't
It's
have to be dealing with
2024,
maintenance.
man. It's
Yeah, yeah.
2024. All right, so
Flip the
let's do
switch.
something fun here. Let's do a tier list of the bosses that are in this raid, and this tier list is going to be basically from the regular person's perspective, not the race to world first, etc., because we know how those bosses went for them, but obviously we have a different view.
Yep.
So you can use whatever criteria you want to rank the bosses, but let's see if we like the bosses, if we enjoyed them, or if they were just badly designed, etc. And I guess,
Disclaimer:
yep,
mine's gonna be heroic, so not
heroic.
mythic. I only,
Okay.
yeah,
I
for
mean,
me, for me.
you've
So
seen, yeah, I'm fine with that, but obviously I haven't done all the bosses on Mythic as well. But we've seen how they look in Mythic.
yeah,
We know
for sure.
how most of this, how it works, and etc. So,
Yeah,
so let's get started with the first boss, Ulgrax. What is your take on this boss?
I gave Uldrax a C. I have Uldrax all the way. That's my lowest ranked one. I didn't like the feeding. I mean, I know it's supposed to be a simple boss. The grips were kind of cool. I mean, it wasn't. It just wasn't a fun fight for me. It's
Okay.
just like it wasn't fun for a first
That's
fight.
fair enough.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I will say this, for in terms of difficulty, that was probably one of the hardest for bosses I've ever seen. Usually the first
Okay.
boss, even on Mythic, right? Like heroic aside, but I'll talk from the Mythic perspective in this case. Usually the first boss on Mythic is a little bit of a challenge, but you go in there, you fight for a while, you kill it, it falls over, and then
Yeah,
it's like a loot pinata, and you're farming this, and there's no problems
yeah,
with
yeah.
it.
Uh-huh.
We
Yep.
actually didn't kill that boss on our first night. It took a little bit
Okay.
of progression, right? It was not that easy to handle if you're a little bit of undergeared, etc., right? So for
Yeah.
me, that was the hardest ever first boss that I fought on Mythic, and I haven't fought all of them. Um, but somehow I kind of enjoy that. Like I liked a little bit of a challenge, you know. I didn't
Yeah.
want for this boss to just go over and fall. So I guess if we put it, I would put it maybe into high B, low A. So maybe if we agree to put it on B, maybe.
Sure. Yeah.
Because it's I don't know if the first boss is supposed to just fall over, but I kind of like the difficulty, right? I kind of enjoy
Yeah.
the challenge, but maybe it should have been a little bit easier. So from design perspective, props to Blizzard, but maybe it should have been a little bit easier.
Let me say one thing on that. They changed. They made a change, and I think they wanted it to be a little bit tougher because I think maybe this isn't the first time, but there was no BOEs for Mythic until after this boss,
Yeah,
right? And then we know that's a big thing, right? Pugs go in, they kill the first boss, and then they farm for BOEs and try to make money. I think it was intentionally meant to be a little bit more difficult to curtail some of that BOE gold farming. Just a
maybe
thought.
maybe that's a good take. That's a good take. All right, second boss, Bloodbound Horror. What's your experience with that?
I had Bloodbound higher than Ulgrax. I had Bloodbound at a B. I like the splitting the raid. Uh, I like the positioning that has to happen in that between the tanks and knowing where to put it and line it up for the beams. I like the go out and go in. Um, I think it felt quite easy to conquer though, and so that's the only thing why I have it a little bit lower. I think once you kind of understood the biggest part for us on that was the tanking positioning. Um, in Mythic, it was a little bit different in the sense of the hit squad for the ads and making sure we got that, but that still was kind of easy. So it felt kind of an easy boss. Fun. It was exciting to get it done quick. So I rating it at a high B for
Okay.
me.
Um, I will agree on this one, and I'm not going to put it higher, mostly for personal reasons. But I kind of like the design, you know. But yeah, it
Yeah.
took some time to figure out how you aim the beams, etc. That
Yeah.
circle
Yeah.
around. The problem with me was that so on Mythic, when you go into the underground phase, whatever, there's three big ads that spawn, and on Mythic, one of them is far away from the others,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So what we did, and I guess that's the well accepted strat, is we had that small squad of basically, which
Yeah.
for
Hit
us it
squad.
was 2 DPS and 1 healer that would go and kill that far ad, and then everybody's gonna stay on the
Yeah.
other side. And I had to go and heal those 2 people, and that was not enjoyable, man. Like I managed to do it, like it was not hard, etc. But
Yeah.
like I'm a shaman, I play Restoration Shaman this year, so I
Yeah.
need people to be stacked so I can pop my
Yeah.
cooldowns. I
Yep.
heal everybody, and now all of a sudden I'm locked there. I'm spamming my
Agree.
healing surges, and I had to do that because like the healer on my end, the healer who'd come down with me was a Preservation Evoker, so for them going there and spamming their living flame, that was like it
Not
doesn't
gonna work.
work. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I was just sitting there spamming my healing surges, and at the same time the priests are doing these huge amounts of healing because they're
Yeah.
standing in the middle of the raid
Yeah.
and they're popping their
Yep.
halos. And I'm like,
Yep.
yeah, that's probably a fun fight, but I'm just standing here pressing that one button. So that's why I
It's
didn't
so
like
funny.
it. But it was not a bad design fight, I guess. For a second boss, it's also probably a
Yeah.
little bit higher on the difficulty curve. But I guess
Yep.
we can put it on the we can agree there.
Yeah.
All right, Sikran, what's your experience with that?
I'll let you go first on Instagram. I want to hear what your thoughts
Okay,
are.
so Sikran, so on Mythic, you have to, so there's those 4 people that get marked and they need to run out, etc. And on Mythic, eventually you drop those puddles when the boss hits you. You're going to run out of space if you don't manage your space correctly. So
Yep.
on Mythic, though, you those 4 people cannot overlap with each other or with the other shades that you left out from the previous hits. So basically on Mythic you have to make this perfect square, right? Which is very tight and it's on the side. And we had a lot of problems with people doing all kinds of shapes that didn't resemble a square, so to
Yeah.
speak. For some reason also, and that was really bad for me as well. That's personal, but for some reason every time I would get this mechanic, I would freeze. I would lag out, right? And that was quite bad because then you wipe the raid, right? And they're like, "Why are you not doing your mechanic?" I'm like, "Guys, I did it on my screen, but I can see that I'm frozen, right? So I guess on their screens, I'm still on top of the boss, and
Yeah.
we know how
Yep.
that ends." So
Yep.
that was relatively negative experience from that perspective. But otherwise, I kind of like the design of the boss because at the end the room is filled up, and then you're running out of space. Maybe you sack the last 4 people to get the mechanic, and they just run out in the empty space. So I would also put it between A and B. It was nice. It was interesting design, but my experience with it was also not something that was positive, unfortunately.
Yeah, I have it at A. I liked it. I like the positional. I think it just makes people you know have more awareness of what others are doing more often, and I like that. It kind of makes people just not do their rotation and not just go to one point, but now you have to pay attention to where the other and where you fit in that group and where your assignment should be, and it challenges the brain. So I like that. I think that's kind of helping the players get a little bit more intelligent than just doing what was that old boss in Naxxramas, the one that the big fat dude that it was, just the single
The
target boss where you're
patchwork,
just hitting. Yeah,
patchwork,
patchwork.
yeah.
Yeah, patchwork. Yeah, that's like this the dumbest fight, right? And it's like I like that level of mobility, movement, awareness of where you need to be versus proximity to other players, and understanding the real estate and kind of having to be really tight and coordinated instead of just like run over there and get away from people. It's like, no, run right here, make sure you're not too close to Johnny or Sally, and make sure you guys are in order so we don't blow each other up. I like that. So I like the mechanic in that one. I thought that was a fun one.
All right, so I guess A is fair. I agree on A. Rashanan, the Mythic Plus boss. What's your take on
Yeah.
this?
I like the fact that it was Mythic Plus and you take him down to, 60% and he shows up in the raid and you
Some
get to take
people are
him from
actually
60.
angry about that. They're like, "Why the
Well,
hell
yeah,
is
I'm
the
sure
boss
people
starting at
that have like big
60%?"
Yeah, like the people that have big execute at the top of the health pools,
Yeah,
right? Like, you think about hunters and their marksman, their mark, hunter's mark, and people that do more damage when it's full is like,
yeah,
oh, sorry, he's already at
yeah.
60%. So and then for the others that have executes at sub 20, he's going to be at sub 20 a lot longer than the other bosses because he started at 60. So they're going to perform quite well actually because that execute phase
Yeah.
is going to last a little bit longer. I have him at a B. I think you know it's I didn't like his model. I'll be honest, I didn't like the bug. Um, the poisons and stuff are cool, and some of the spread out and those things are cool. The platform was super big, and so like movement and ability to fall off. I mean, I don't think we had anybody fall off, but I don't even know if you can fall off. But it seems like you can get gripped off. I think.
Yeah, yeah, you can.
Yeah, it's interesting. It was a cool fight. I have it as a B. I don't have any really personal it wasn't a fun fight for me. I'll just say that
Okay.
it wasn't like super easy but it wasn't super hard. So I kind of put it as the highest B. So like on the top side of B.
Okay. Yeah. To me, it was kind of neutral fight. I kind of enjoyed the mechanics. They were interesting. The running around could be a little bit annoying. There's
Yeah.
also 2 paths that the boss could take. So
Yeah.
sometimes, you don't have the Warlock gate set up correctly,
Yeah.
so it makes it slower. And then the small ads that spawn, that was a little bit annoying because sometimes they would just turn and kill the person, and you would have to they would have to go for externals. That there were some moments there where you would wipe because some mistakes happened and it didn't feel like you had to wipe on the specific
Yep.
mistakes.
Yep.
That boss actually took us way too many attempts to kill compared to regular guilds for some reason. So it was not a very positive experience for me as well. Um, but I guess for like a mid-tier boss, it was fine, kind of scripted fight once you know where to go with all the mechanics. So yeah, high B I guess is also fine. I guess I'm fine to put it there. Yeah. I don't know if I want to put it higher for a boss like that. All right, so let's move on to our favorite Broodtwister of an axe.
Yeah.
I'll just go straight away. Like this is D tier for me. As I said, this was the worst ever experience I've ever had in raid. Um, because of lags, because of the weak auras, and if it was designed a little bit better, maybe I could put it a little bit higher. But the sentiment in our guild is basically nobody likes egg bosses, right? Because you had
Yeah.
the one in I
Yeah.
forgot the vault, I think, with where you had to run
Yeah.
around and break the eggs
That
with the
was
staff. Yeah,
yeah, I was just talking about that
yeah.
one.
Nobody, I guess, enjoyed that one. Nobody enjoyed Brood Twister. It's a different topic whether or not you should have egg bosses, because I guess that's something that they like and they keep designing them. But the implementation of this one, whether or not you like eggs, that was Dismo, and that's easy D
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think, when you need that much external information helpers to get a kill, something's wrong, and that's bad design. So yeah, easy D.
Easy D. Okay. So let's jump on Kayveza. I guess I can go again first, but
Yeah.
I
Yep.
love this fight, man. I love this fight because,
Yeah.
as I said, it's simple mechanics, but that doesn't prevent the fight from being a huge
Yeah.
DPS and healing check.
Yep.
Because even if one person dies, then people get more lines on the transition, so you have to play good. But at the same time, you don't need any weak auras. There's no lag. It's just execution. It kind of gets a little bit annoying when people start, as you said, they start doing the same mistake over and over again. But it's
Yep.
usually like it's not one person. It's usually like I do 2 or 3 mistakes per night. But if everybody's doing two or
Sure.
three mistakes per night, then
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
just piles up, right? But
Yeah.
but
Yep.
I don't know. That's my favorite fight. I love it. I love the design of how you spawn the orbs and then you get sucked into the middle, and
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
looks cool as well. Like the visuals are,
Yep.
are amazing.
Yeah.
So that's an S tier for me. That's my favorite fight this year.
Yeah, one of the things you didn't mention, which I like, is the execute, right? And that makes people have to use defensives. So again, it's another one of these fights where if you're not used to pressing your defensives,
Yeah.
you're gonna get one shot, and it's not like you have your whole health pool. If you hit 10%, you're dead. You're done. And so that's a nice, cool element that forces players that normally maybe don't push a defensive on a regular basis be very, very aware of like their health pool and making sure it's not just on the healer to keep me alive, but I need to push a defensive or consume a warlock cookie or a health potion
Yep.
to make sure I don't get to that 10%, which is a nice additional layer of like, oh, I need to do something. So I like this fight a lot. I think it's a good fight.
Do we put it in S?
Yeah, it's S
All right.
tier.
I'll add though, as a healer, that's the one thing that I don't like. I don't like the 10% because my job is basically I have this bar and my goal, it's not to do
Yeah.
DPS, it's not to let this bar go to 0. And now there's
Yeah.
this other threshold that I actually don't see
Yeah.
exactly where it is on my bars.
No,
So I know I
but
need to
that's
keep
not your
people topped up.
job. It's
Yeah.
not your job. It's not. It's like I tell the rest of druids, it's not your job to spot heal. It's your job to
Yeah.
blanket the raid. That in this fight, it's not your job. Your job it's their job to make sure they don't hit
Yeah.
10%. That's their
I get
responsibility.
that, but it's just like I'm a little bit annoyed because it's basically moving the health bar a little bit to the side, and you don't have a
It is.
visual for
Yeah, it
that.
is. It's cutting
Uh,
off 10% of your health
but
pool,
yeah, I
100%.
don't mind
Yeah.
it, right? I don't mind it, and yeah, and Mythic specifically, you gotta keep your defensives for if you get a mechanic because the Queen's
Yeah.
Bane, that's one of the hardest hitting abilities in the raid, I think. If you don't have
Yeah.
a defensive, you're gonna die. But yeah, if something happens, you need to be aware that like you even if you like running the orbs out, you might be a little bit of out of range for certain healers. So people need to be very self-aware and
Mindful when they're
ready. Yeah,
using it.
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
but that's
Yep.
that's an aspect that I like. So as I said, easily my favorite fight this year.
Very
All
cool.
right, so now Silken Court. That's a fight that we haven't seen on Mythic yet, but I don't think that's going to prevent us from ranking it. How has that been for you?
I love that fight. It's my favorite fight. I
Okay.
like the two bosses. I like the lines. I like the dispel mechanic. I like the flat like it but see I like when the game challenges people to have more awareness of what's going on around them. I think it's trying to make people just get out of your rotation. It's not always about damage, it's about execution, it's about positional awareness, it's about paying attention where other people are. And if you're not doing those things, look, you can't, like, as even for healers, you can't just dispel it. You got to wait till the person is next to the boss to do the dispel. If you're just dispelling it, you're wasting a dispel. And if you do that too many times, you wipe the raid, right? So if you get too far away from your webbed player, you wipe the raid. If you stay in, if you're not paying attention to ground mechanics, you're gonna get impaled. So I like that. I get it. It's a challenge, but I think it's an attempt to bring some of the awareness to raiders up from just pushing their rotation and moving out of circles on the ground.
Okay. I will add to this. I kind of enjoy the fight as well. The mechanics are cool. All right, the charges, how you stop the boss, and then the amps where they take more damage. Although I don't care much about that as a healer. The dispels are also cool. My problem with this fight is that compared to Kaiveza, where basically if you get a mechanic, it is your responsibility. It's very important that you handle it correctly, but
Yeah.
you're on your own, right? You know where
Uh-huh.
you need to go and you're not dependent on somebody else. While
Hmm.
Silken Cord, for example, as you said, those webs that are tethers between you and another person,
Yep.
you're kind of
Hmm.
dependent on the other person too, right?
Of
Because
course. Yeah.
especially when you don't get them from the eggs on the ground, but you get them on the
In the
second
second.
phase, and
Yeah.
somebody has to break it, but then somebody doesn't, and everybody
Yeah.
breaks it, and you're screwed.
Yeah.
And
You're
I
dead.
know
Right.
that this only becomes harder on Mythic because then the rate is divided into colors and you cannot touch anybody from the opposite color. So now it's more mechanics where it is your own responsibility, but you're also kind of dependent on other people not to walk on top of your position correctly because, you have to get to a point and soak an orb, but then somebody's standing there, right? So this is kind of like. Adding a layer of difficulty that I don't look forward to. I don't enjoy that much. I know it's a group effort to kill a boss,
Sure.
but I
Yeah.
I kind of enjoy, there's the mechanic. I know how to handle it. If I screw up, I screw up. I know it's my fault, but now I need to look for that other person too, and I have to care about them as well. And I don't know. Maybe that's what mythic rating is about, but that's something that I'm
Yep.
kind of not looking forward to. That said, though, I kind of enjoy the fight. I wouldn't mind putting it high, maybe A. I don't know if it's S for you.
No, I have it at the top for me personally, but I do agree with. I think it's perspective, right? Because like what you said is very true, and that's one of the reasons why I don't mythic raid right now
Yeah,
is because of
you
that
don't want to
that
deal with it.
dependency on other people, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
and I know I can do what I need to do, but now you're telling me I need to do it with that other person, right? And they have to execute it properly, and that's why I'm not in a place where I'm ready for that yet. Um, but I do love that fight. It's my favorite fight. For me, it's S. But I respect what you're saying on like the mechanics, especially and then in Mythic with even more awareness on, hey, don't cross paths, don't touch that other person because then you're gonna wipe the raid. I think that's gonna be super interesting on how guilds that are under top 2,000 in the world are gonna handle that. I think it's interesting. So
Okay.
I like it. I'm good with A. I'm good with S.
All right.
Definitely not B,
Yeah, yeah,
definitely
yeah.
not C.
So low S or high A.
High A is good. I think high A is
High A is good.
probably
All right.
yeah.
All right. And then we have the queen, the big butt queen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Obviously, it was something else that we haven't played on Mythic, but what's your take on this fight?
Oh man. I will say I don't think it's as difficult as Broodtwister. Um I don't like the three different phases. I guess you could say four
Yeah.
technically. Um there's a lot going on there, and Mythic it's even worse. With the portals and the orbs. I think again it's one of those fights that's maybe overly designed for the top 3 or 4 guilds, and everybody else is going to suffer. I think conceptually, like it's kind of fun to see all those different elements in a single fight, but in execution and when you're dealing with 20 people, and one person doesn't soaks the wrong orb, they blow up the bubble
Yeah.
late, they blow it up early. They don't pay attention to the pull in, and they're too close because they're tunnel visioning on the rotation to pop the shield. They forget that they're going to get gripped in on the second platform, and they fall off.
And then the
They don't.
spells on the second platform,
Yeah, I mean,
obnoxious.
it's just yeah, exactly. It's just so much going on. I think it's really designed for the top, and I don't think that's fair for the rest of everybody. I have this one super low. Yeah, I have this as a C on mine.
Okay. I will say this. I kind of agree with you because this fight is really cool to watch. Like if you're just watching
Yeah,
it,
yeah. You're not playing
the
it.
design of the mechanics is actually amazing. Like you're jumping up over those circles, and then there's sports and those things that you need to carry over in the last phase, etc. Like when you're watching this, and when I was watching the race tour first, I had a blast. It looked
Yeah,
very hard, of course, but it also looked amazing. But then when you get to play it, and then there's all those little things that you already mentioned, and for example, even the webs that you get webbed to the ground,
yeah, yeah,
sometimes if you some classes have abilities to take those off, but then
yeah.
others just have to be positioned correctly and
Easy.
you
Yeah.
weave them, etc. Right? The spells as we mentioned, and then the last phase also has all those mechanics going on. So I could see this being yes a little bit maybe too much for like the regular player, to handle. We actually had to prog this initially on heroic, right? It was
Yeah.
not it
Us
was
too.
not given.
Wasn't a pushover. Yeah.
Exactly. The last old raid that we did, we actually had to kick some people for that last boss
Yep.
because they were
Us too. Yeah,
underperforming.
actually we finally killed it on the alt raid with all the alts. We didn't have to
Yeah.
bring in any mains.
We
So
don't do
yeah.
that a lot. We just had this casual run, but we had to trim for this to get killed. And then I can only imagine how much harder it is on Mythic. And I know that they're nerfing some of the stuff there right now. There were the problems with the webs that actually get collapsed in, where it
Uh-huh.
would pass, but or actually the visual would go away, but you could still get hit after. And then all the stuff that you have to dodge on the ground. So that makes it not that enjoyable for me. Again, going back to Kaiveza, it has only few mechanics, but the fight is very fun because it's well designed. This one has a ton of mechanics, and
Yeah.
ton of
Yeah.
phases and things like
Yep.
that. So
Yep.
you easily get overwhelmed. So yeah, I'm fine putting it not high enough. I love the fight. I love watching it, but when you get to play it, and I don't think I'll enjoy wiping 200 times on this fight either. So maybe we can put it. You said what, C or B?
I put C. I put it at
C.
C.
I guess we can put it
Yeah.
low B, or I guess we can pull it C. Let's have something in the C tier as well. I think that's
I
fair.
mean, it's all perspective, right?
Yeah,
And
it
I
is
just like you
perspective.
said, it's
It's
amazing to
somewhere
watch
here.
and it's amazing to think about like all the thought that went into it. But when you're executing it, and it does feel good when you're playing it
Yeah,
and everything's hitting right, but it feels extremely bad when people are popping early, they're not paying attention, and they actually run into the pop. They go to the wrong pop because two
yeah,
people on one side got it and they don't know where to go, and like it's just like, and it's very frustrating, even like So yeah, I just think for, again, if you're world top 100, this is an amazing fight to prog in, I'm sure, and because of the challenge and the different elements within it and the responsibilities of a lot of different individuals. It's not just do damage; it's put things in the right place, use your abilities. That maybe a shaman, you can do your little wolf thing to get out of
yeah,
it, right? And then warlock, you can use your warlock port to get your roots, and deterrence, and it's cool to have classes of freedom, whatever. Like that's cool to be able to incorporate and see people switching specs to do some of those things to accommodate that. Um, so that part of it's cool, but in execution, when you think about the larger community, it just feels like it's going to be unachievable for a lot of people,
yeah.
unfortunately.
And I get it. It's a last boss. It needs to be hard, but maybe that's a little bit way too far for this one. Maybe
Yeah,
they
I mean,
did
I
a little
killed
bit
it
too
by
far.
myself once. I went in there on myself, and I got a 619 crest for killing it by myself with some NPCs. That was pretty fun.
Yeah, on that, like I don't know, man. Like I did this too, but I don't know if there were actually any mechanics there. Like it just fell over.
There's none. You just do
So
your healer, your
yeah.
DPS, and that's it.
So that story mode, I guess it's fine for some casual people, but that's not rating. Like it's not even the same boss. It's just like an NPC.
No,
It's
it's
like a target
totally
dummy.
it's a joke. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's funny.
All
So
right.
funny.
All right. Well, so that's our tier list. Any other topics that you want to touch on? Something that we missed?
Let me hit my notes real quick, but I think we went through pretty much everything. We didn't really talk about Severed Sands. I think we touched on it, but I do think for rating, I think I'd like to see a bit more, especially after um especially I think 9% is good, especially as a disc priest. I think it's amazing, right? But disc priest is totally at the bottom right
But
now.
does this priest get double for it? Because it's damage and
Well,
healing.
it's damage, healing, and absorbs. So it's
Yeah.
all three
So it's
actually.
triple. Yeah. Okay.
But
Um.
it's
So
still
are
worse.
you
It's still
saying
worse.
that it's 9% right now? Obviously, the number changes every 2 weeks. But do you think it's obtained in a nice pace, or it's too slow, too quick,
I think it's too
too
slow. I
slow?
think it should be like amplified after like the Hall of Fame, especially. Maybe not like. I think I still want to respect CE because there's a certain pride that comes with getting
Yeah.
CE, and it is an exclusive. It's an exclusive group. Maybe not world first, but it's still there's still some like glory around cutting edge. I'm proud of mine. I got a lot of them, and it's like I know that's not something easy to achieve. Um, but I think for some of the other people that don't normally get CE or want to at least get through the whole thing on Mythic, even if it's after the fact, I don't know. I'd like to see. We talked about this on the last one, but I want new players to come in and feel like they can accomplish some of these things, and it's not some unachievable thing. So I think Severed Sands is something that they can do to accommodate some of that. I like that addition, and I think I'd like to see more of it, especially not every 2 weeks, but maybe even every week. I do like that it's Warband though. I think that that's amazing.
Yeah. I think if
Um,
it's every week, it's just going to make you feel a little bit better. Because right now, if you're in the week where you don't get the new stack, you're like,
yeah,
man, I have to wait for the next one. So I think right now it's like 1.5% or something, right? So maybe if
yeah,
they do every 2 weeks, so maybe if they do 1% every week, so it's a little bit
yeah.
less,
Just
but you
make
get
it
it
more
every week.
gradual. Yeah,
Yeah. So
exactly. Yeah,
that will make people feel a little bit better. It's going to be maybe a little bit quicker to obtain. What I love though, and I need to say this, the currency that you get is warbound. And I love that because on my main, I don't want to do heroic anymore. There's no point. Like I've killed all the bosses. The gear from there is irrelevant to me, and we are extending our lockout, so we're not killing even the mythic bosses every week, right? So I don't get
hmm
any of that currency on my main, but being able to just go even if in LFR in some of my low ults just to kill the queen and maybe get a chance on the mount, you can get those and then transfer them to your main,
yeah,
and that feels
yep,
really good. Like this
yeah,
goes back to how good the warbound stuff is in general in this expansion. But that feels really good because then I can go and turn them in on my main, and then the mythic boss that I'm progging, I'm getting that buff
yeah,
because I
yep,
played on my ults. That makes the whole picture feel complete and really
yeah,
nice. Yeah.
yeah. I think it's a good system. I like that for
Yeah.
sure.
So fingers crossed that they're gonna keep it. I think they said that's the intention, but I'm really hoping that this is something that stays because, especially as you said, that there's some pride into being sea guild and killing everything, etc. But I think that for guilds that are killing the queen right now, this is a small buff for them right now, right? Especially if they killed it a few weeks back when it was not 9%. So I don't think that's going to take away from their pride. But at the same
Yeah,
time, for guilds like mine, where we're getting those much needed buffs,
yep,
that's actually huge, right?
yeah.
It's huge for
Big.
us because
Yep,
without this, it's probably few extra weeks progging each
yep,
boss, and we don't have that many weeks in the tier because we
yeah.
we
That's
don't
right.
raid that
Yep,
much. And
yep.
just thinking back about that Smoldering prog that I mentioned, the guild had many wipes sub 5%. Like we had 0.5% wipes, we had 1% wipe,
Wow.
things like that, right? And there were multiple of those. And if that buff was there, instead of looking into a 450 boost boss kill, it
Cut it in
probably would
half.
have been, I don't know, half of that, something like
Yeah,
this. But
probably.
it
Yeah.
would first let you see the next boss, it would make you feel more accomplished, etc. And looking at from that perspective, especially that late into the tier where you're progging that last boss that you're not gonna kill the next one, right? You're just trying to kill that
Yep.
the boss that you're
Yep.
currently on. If
Yep.
that helps you to accomplish it a little bit faster, I don't think anyone's gonna be angry about this. Like everybody's gonna be
No.
happy that they're gonna feel better that they accomplished something. And the
Yeah.
CE guilds were long gone at this point because they killed the
Yep,
last
exactly.
boss. So that's one of the huge wins for this expansion in general for me.
Yeah. Yep, I agree.
All
Yep.
right.
Right on the same page as you.
All
Cool.
right.
Yeah,
So
I think that's everything.
that's going to be all for this episode. Thank you very much, guys, for watching. Check out the description below for links to our social media and other ways to follow the podcast. And we'll see you for the next episode.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everybody. See ya.